Hi, everybody. Good morning. Happy Sunday. What a great day to be with you. Before we get started, I wanted to just talk about the craziness that happened yesterday to the former president. You know, regardless of where you are on the political spectrum, ultimately, if you're a follower of Jesus, your allegiance is to the kingdom of God. And the kingdom of God is one of peace and justice and harmony and cooperation and love. And so there's two ways that we can respond to something like this. We can take all of our opinions, we can take all of our beliefs and contribute more to the violence and division, or we can be intentional about using our words and taking actions that contribute to the well-being of our society. And so I hope that those of us in this room who have been hearing the messages that you've been hearing for quite some time will choose the path of love and the path of peace, even in the face of disharmony. What's really scary to me is when something like that happens, the kind of violence that can ensue after, because now the collective atmosphere is one of fear, as if it wasn't already, but that kind of intensifies, And so it's important for us to remember that God is still on the throne and that God has a plan and purpose and that God is going to use us, as insignificant as we may seem and even as small as we may seem as a community. God is going to use each and every one of us as individuals to make a difference in the collective as we show up as the best versions of ourselves, as we show up with hearts that are open and with hearts that are ready to provide empathy even to those who are not like us. So that's my little spiel on that. Okay. Well, we are beginning a new series today, and it is called Under Construction. How many of you guys know there is never a point in the spiritual journey, there's never a point in your life as a human being that you ever can say that you have arrived, right? We are in process. Now, on the one hand, it is true that you are already complete and whole as you are. On the other hand, there's always more of you that you can become. There's always more of your potential that you can live into. There's always more of your divine nature that you can begin to embody in and through your everyday life. But if you ever get to this point where you think you've made it and you've got nothing to work on, your mind's in the wrong place, because the life of faith is a continual renovation project. We are constantly reconstructing ourselves, rebuilding ourselves into the people that God has created us to be. Has anybody ever been in a point in their life where you thought, you know what, I'm over that. You messed up, and then you think in your mind, I thought I was past that. I thought I would never do that again. And yet here you find yourself in the same place that you've been a million times before. That's what it means to be human. And that's why the scriptures say, be careful when you think you stand, because that's when you're most liable to actually fall. We've got to continually live with this awareness that we're just human and we're going to mess up, and we got to give ourselves room to mess up in that way and never think that we're completely and totally over all of those patterns from a long time ago that we used to engage in. No. We're liable to fall at any time, and it doesn't make you any less of a good person. It just makes you a human being. And this is why the scriptures say in the book of Colossians to put off the old nature with its practices and put on the new nature, which is being renewed in knowledge after the image of its creator. So it's not like once you start walking with God, the old you is gone forever, and now the new you is here, and you're never going to have to deal with any of that stuff from the past. No. It doesn't matter how far along you are on the spiritual journey. There are vestiges of the old you that will continue to try and drag you back into the unhealthy patterns that you're trying to escape from. And so putting off the old and putting on the new isn't a one-time thing. Every day, we are constantly and consistently putting off the old nature with its practices and putting on the new nature. Like the clothes that you put on every day you've got to make a choice. I'm going to put on the new nature. I'm going to be the person that I know God created me to be. It's a conscious decision and a choice. Every day you have to start again and choose to be the new you that God has created you to be. And that all begins with your thoughts. Your thoughts create the trajectory and direction in which your life goes. And so think of your thoughts as like these sources of energy that you plug into through your belief. Okay? If you believe a negative thought, then you're going to begin to exude that kind of energy in your everyday life. But the power is in your belief. So you will, if you're a human being, continue to hear the voice of the old you, trying to bring you into negativity and judgment and comparison and jealousy and fear, which is why we have to learn how to be the doorkeepers of our mind. Okay? Just because a thought comes into your mind and knocks on your door doesn't mean you need to let it in. Okay? When bitterness comes, when fear comes, when anxiety comes, when stress comes, sorry, you got to keep going. But when love comes and goodness comes and beauty comes and grace comes, you let that in. But you are the doorkeeper of your mind. It's up to you to decide which thoughts you're going to cling to and give the power of your belief to, and which ones you're going to allow to simply pass and go. So the big idea of today's message is that your life is constantly under construction and you happen to be the architect. Okay, so you get to decide every day who you're going to be and how you're going to show up in this world. That power has been given to you. How beautiful that God has given us like this blank canvas that we get to draw whatever we would like on. You have that power. You have the ability. But every day it's going to take you choosing to show up and be the person that you know God has created you to be. And as you live your life, the beautiful thing is, who was it that said, I think it was Socrates who said, the unexamined life is not worth living. The unexamined life is not worth living. So if you're serious about growth and spiritual development, guess what? You're constantly examining yourself. It doesn't mean you have to be overly analytical about everything that you do and being obsessed with fixing yourself, because that is just like stressful, okay, to always be in that mode. But it simply means that you're a person who reflects on your experiences. You reflect on your actions and behaviors. And as you do that, you may come to recognize, hey, I don't like what I said in that situation. Maybe I could have showed up better in this situation. Maybe I could change or adapt the way that I reacted when this person said that to me. And as a result of that reflection and self-examination, you make the adjustments that you need to make, but you don't have to guilt yourself or shame yourself in the process, because you know I am in process and I am under construction and this is a part of the whole thing. And every day I have the opportunity to recreate myself. So you never get to a point where you're totally over all the old patterns, but you do get to a point where you stop beating yourself up about it. Okay? So there's this one philosopher by the name of Ken Wilber who created this paradigm called the 4 stages of spiritual development. And I want to share this with you because sometimes it's important to have frameworks that can help us navigate our lives. You know, so frameworks like this, they're just like a map. Okay, the map isn't the actual territory, but the map will help you navigate your way through the territory. Okay, and these 4 stages of spiritual development have been very helpful for me, and I think they'll be helpful for you. It's waking up, growing up, cleaning up, and showing up. Now, these stages aren't necessarily linear, even though we can experience them that way, but it's more of a cyclical thing. We're constantly waking up and growing up and cleaning up and showing up. Okay, and when you think you got everything cleaned up, God will wake you up to something else you got to grow up to, and then you got to show up in a new way and start moving different. Okay, so again, it's not like you graduate one stage and move to the other and now you never have to deal with anything ever again. This all happens simultaneously, but we're We're going to pause for a moment at each of these stages because each of these stages have something to teach us about this process of growing into the image and likeness of Christ. So I want to start with this idea of waking up. Okay, waking up. Waking up isn't something, unfortunately, that you can just force or that you can do on your own. It really is a grace. It's like something just happens to you. It's not something that you do per se. Okay, so if you've read like the book of Acts and you see Paul's conversion story, you know, he's just riding his horse one day and then this bright light appears and he hears the voice of God. And his life changed forever as a result of that. That's an example of like a wake-up moment. And many of us have had our own wake-up moments. I can think about my life. I've had several wake-up moments. And thank God for these wake-up moments, because when you have these deeply profound spiritual realizations, it totally shifts your perception of reality. It totally changes the way that you see and interpret the world in which you live and the way that you understand yourself. So for me, one of my first wake-up experiences was in college. And I remember as a result of getting around some young people my age who were passionate about their faith, coming to this understanding that this world really does not have anything to offer to me. And I realized that my life would only find fulfillment and satisfaction and completion when I come back home to God. Huge wake-up call for me. The only reason why I'm here today doing what I'm doing is because when I was 19 years old, I had that wake-up moment. And I've had a series of wake-up moments after that. But that was a really profound one. It takes a big wake-up moment to change everything about who you're hanging out with, what you're doing with your free time, what you're listening to, the habits and the patterns that you give yourself over to as a human being. All of that changed tremendously. And I went kind of crazy on the extreme end. You know, I remember at that time I was like, you know what? Because I was super, I went super into the all the way Christian. And I was like, I can't listen to music anymore that is not Christian. And so I literally threw away all my old CDs, okay? I stopped using LimeWire and Napster. I'm like, I'm not downloading illegal songs anymore. And I went to the Christian bookstore and I just bought a whole bunch of like Christian albums, like hip hop and rap. And it's funny because sometimes like when you're first starting out in this process of change, you kind of have to go to those extremes. You know what I mean? Eventually you balance out and you realize, oh my goodness, I don't have to like just X out everything that is like not of God, you know? Like balance is okay and moderation is okay. And you learn how to just be a regular human again. But sometimes in the beginning process, you have to go to the other extreme, right? And I did that. But it was obviously God was doing a work in me. I literally was doing a complete 180 and changing the direction of my life. It was a wake-up moment for me, my coming back home to God moment. Another wake-up moment for me was as a result of my deconstruction process, which I've talked about a lot. So I became this very passionate Christian, started going to seminary school, and the next thing you know, I started questioning everything about my faith. But then I started questioning things so much that I finally got to a point that I didn't need any more answers. And that was the wake-up aha moment for me that also changed the trajectory of my spiritual growth, because I started to realize that God cannot be confined to my constructs. Okay, God cannot be limited to any sort of concepts or beliefs that I may have about God. And so that totally opened up the field for me and allowed me not to be threatened anymore by difference and distinction of opinion and belief. Because I don't even know, quite frankly, if I got all the answers correctly. What I do know, the only thing I know is that I don't know. And that God is love, and when I walk in love, I'm walking with God. That's about it. That's why I say love is my religion. You can keep Christianity. Christianity is cool, but love is my religion. You know, and that was a huge realization that I came to as a result of going through that deconstruction process, which at first was very difficult and challenging. I experienced what some people call the dark night of the soul, where it's like, what? You know, your entire identity is shifted and changed, and you don't have any grounding anymore. You don't have any sort of foundation. That's a scary experience to go through. And yet, because God was with me through that journey, on the other side of it, I was able to come out with a faith that was even more vibrant and alive. Thank goodness. But that was a big wake-up moment for me to realize, hey, I can't limit God to any sort of belief system. And in reality, this whole Jesus thing isn't about getting my theology right. It's about the way I'm living my life, the way that I'm treating other people. Am I connected to my heart? Am I walking in love? Am I forgiving other people? Some of us are so concerned with, like, what's going to happen in the end of the world? How is this whole thing going to end? Or how do you interpret this Bible verse? Or what do you believe about free will or predestination? And we get caught up in all these things. And it's like, hey, do you even know how to be grateful? Do you know how to walk in peace? Does your life produce the fruit of the Spirit? Because if you don't got that, I don't care what kind of answers you got. It really doesn't matter. So that was a big wake-up call for me. Another wake-up call for me was literally when I experienced life as meaningless, which was somewhat intertwined with this deconstruction thing. But I'm a philosopher at heart. I love theology and philosophy, and there are schools of philosophical thought that espouse that life is meaningless, and I decided to entertain that notion for quite some time. And of course, inevitably, as a result of that, I became a little bit depressed. But then I had a wake-up moment. I had an aha moment. And my wake-up moment was, wait a second, if life is meaningless, why am I so sad about it? Right? Because if it's meaningless, that means it's neutral. It's nothing. But here I am being sad about the fact that life is meaningless. Why? It was like all the light bulbs went off in my head. Because I am giving meaning to the fact that life is meaningless. And in that moment, it was like I totally understood that mind creates reality. My perception creates the world in which I live. And I started to recognize that even though I do not have power over external events, I do have power over the way that I choose to see them. And so what is the meaning that I am making from the situations and circumstances that I find myself in life? Big aha moments. I don't know what your aha moments may have been, but thank God for aha moments. For these wake-up call moments. We need them. And they never stop in the life of faith, which is why the life of faith is so beautiful, because there's always greater and greater depths that we can plunge into God's mysteries. And just when you think you have the whole thing figured out, God comes along and shows you, hey, there's something you're not seeing. And you got to be okay with God shaking things up and rattling your entire world. If you continue to be faithful through that process, on the other side of it, you'll find joy, you'll find peace, and you'll find understanding that goes beyond just the intellectual level, but begins to sink into the intuitive level. True understanding that comes from the heart. So you may experience a lot of these wake-up moments, but here's the deal. Just because you have profound spiritual realizations doesn't mean that you actually live a life that is reflective of that. Okay, so one of the dangers in the spiritual path is that you can be more advanced in your knowledge than you are in your actual living. This is why we've all come across people who know their Bible very well, but they don't act like the people in it. You know what I mean? There's people who they love Jesus, and they talk about Jesus all the time, but their lives resemble nothing of his. So be careful that your knowledge doesn't get more advanced than your actual living. This is why the spiritual journey is not so much about learning as much as it is unlearning all the garbage that you were taught that got in the way of you actually loving other people and being the hands and feet of Christ in this world. So this is why it's not just important to wake up, but you also got to grow up. And growing up is something that happens only when life forces it to happen, unfortunately. We have to be put in these situations where we are brushed up against our limitations. We have to be placed into situations where we feel like we no longer have any control, where all of the unhealed parts of ourselves start rising to the surface. Why? Because spirituality is about facing all of the things that you've been trying to avoid. Let me just save you some trouble as of now. You will never successfully run away from your emotional pain forever. You can try, but you will never successfully run away from all of the aches and pains that you carry deep within you forever. It's impossible. At some point, you have to face it. If you avoid it, whatever it is that you're trying to avoid will continue to come back up over and over and over again until you finally choose to deal with it. And if you think about it, all of our unhealthy patterns as human beings stem from some form of wanting to avoid our pain. And so the sooner you deal with your stuff, the sooner you'll begin to experience some semblance of freedom. But this is why the process of growing up is very difficult. It's very messy. This is why we call it work, inner work. It takes work. And work can be tiring. Work can be exhausting. But it's either you're going to put in the work to deal with your stuff and heal and get better, or eventually you're going to be put in a position where you don't know what to do because it's become so much that now it's very overwhelming and you feel paralyzed by all of the trauma that you're holding on to and the emotional pain that you're carrying within you. It's better to deal with it as you go than to ignore it and then one day have to deal with a monster that is way too big for you to do anything about. How do we get to this point where we face our stuff and stop avoiding it? Suffering. This is why I like how Richard Rohr puts it. Our greatest spiritual teachers in life are love and suffering. Those are the greatest teachers in your life. And those two things normally go together because it's in the context of relationships that all our stuff comes out. Okay, I was married for 7 years, and then it didn't work out. And all my stuff came out. And then sometimes I still wonder to myself, I'm like, whenever I do get in a relationship, I wonder what is going to come up that maybe I'm not even aware of. I'm happy as heck. My life is so peaceful and great. Well, when I get in a relationship, who knows what kind of stuff is going to come up? And that's going to be an invitation for me to have to work on things that maybe I thought I had figured out or things that I didn't think were a problem for me anymore. But guess what? It's in the context of relationships. And it's in those experiences of life when we're going through suffering that we have an opportunity to heal. All of the wounds that you carry may not have been your fault, but your healing is your responsibility. And so we've got to learn how to embrace the difficulties of relationships. We have to learn how to embrace the suffering that life brings. It doesn't mean that you're going to be happy about it when everything goes wrong, but can you find it within you to be grateful even for the negative experiences of life and the bad things that happen, because you know that through this experience, God is going to mold you and teach you and grow you into the person that He's always wanted you to be. All of the times that you get triggered, all of the times that other people annoy you and frustrate you, the ways that you react are giving you feedback about yourself. It's all giving you insight into you. When we get into issues and problems in life, specifically with other people, our first inclination is to blame, to try and change the other person and tell them all the ways that they need to fix themselves. But spirituality isn't about fixing other people. Spirituality is about you fixing you. And so the next time that you get triggered, instead of playing the blame game and judging other people, if you're serious about your spiritual growth and development, ask yourself, what is it in me that is being triggered and why? And don't find fault in the other person. Take responsibility for the way that you're experiencing them yourself. And that's how you begin to experience change little by little in your life. It's about taking responsibility. Because yes, people may push your buttons, but they wouldn't be able to push your buttons if you didn't have any. So if you have buttons, right? If you have buttons, you got to figure out, why are these buttons here? For me, that's a much better question than, why is that person like that? Or why are they bothering me? Or why are they this? Or why are they so horrible? Or why do all these bad things happen to me? Or why? I'd much rather ask the question, you know what? If my button is being pressed, why is there a button there to begin with? And then eventually, maybe, I don't know, you can get to a point where the things that used to bother you and trigger you don't bother you and trigger you anymore. I've experienced growth in that way in many ways, so I know it's possible. You know, back in the day when I was in high school, I used to have like some form of OCD that I inherited from my mother, who likes to have everything perfectly in the right positions all the time. And I still have a little bit of OCD, but it's not like, it's not that bad. All right. And I remember in high school, some of my buddies, like the people that were supposed to be my friends, okay, they would love to flip my bag inside out in school. Look at these people laughing. It's so messed up. Were you the bag flipper in your school? Probably. They loved to flip my bag because they knew that I was going to go crazy. I was just going to flip out and freak out anytime they flip my bag, because now all my folders are out of place, all my papers are in the wrong place, and they were just cracking up, having a ball, while I'm here suffering over the fact that I have to rearrange everything in my bag, right? And so eventually I had to learn to not care about those kind of things, or just continue to suffer every time it happens. And guess what? The bigger reaction that I gave, the more people wanted to bug me. And so, all of us here who are adults, we're really just kids in adult bodies. And we still do the same thing now. It's just not with flipping bags. It's just with passive-aggressive behavior. And sly comments that we make to each other that we know are going to bug this other person. I mean, it's just we're just the worst. So if you would like to excuse yourself from that hamster wheel of suffering, you can do that by starting to become self-reflective, no longer playing that blame game, and allowing the suffering that life puts you through to be an opportunity for growth, self-evaluation, self-reflection. What is it in me that's being triggered? And as you grow up, here's what it looks like to grow up. You start to accept things the way that they are. You stop fighting and resisting reality. Okay? Another example of growing up is you learn how to be okay with multiple perspectives and beliefs. If someone doesn't see something the way that you see it, that's okay. They are their own human being who can see things however the heck they want to see things. And even if there's somebody very close to you, doesn't mean they have to be your clone. Right? So you're okay with a multitude of perspectives. You're okay with somebody disagreeing with you. You're okay with somebody thinking you're wrong. And you can also think somebody else is wrong and still love them. Another example of growing up, you're okay with not knowing. This week in the hospital, many of you know I'm a hospital chaplain, and we had just this horrible call on Friday. It was a pretty intense day on Friday. There was a firefighter in Miami-Dade who took his life, and unfortunately, a lot of what he was seeing on the job was getting to him. And that's normal when it comes to law enforcement and our first responders. They see, in the hospital, we see a lot, but it's kind of cleaned up. When you go to the scene of something, right, and you see a whole bunch of things, that has the power to traumatize you and really mess you up. And this gentleman decided to take his own life. And so I responded to that call. A bunch of firefighters were there to honor him. Everybody was crying left and right, very sad, because this guy was a very good dude. And his wife was in one of the rooms, and her 13-year-old son. When the 13-year-old son came in, because he came in later, the wife came first, and then the 13-year-old son came. When he came into that room, he was bawling, crying, and he looks at me and he says, "Why?" It's the first question that he asked. Why? I just want to know why. You know, and of course there's nothing to say, right? But then his mom showed him that dad had a rosary in his hand when he committed the act. And she gave it to the son, and she said he was wearing this. As soon as she gave him the rosary, he started breaking down. He said, oh my God, he was wearing this? He was wearing this? Oh my God, yes. It was like so much comfort to him. They were Catholic, so that had so much significance. And he kept saying, I just hope that the Lord sees good in him. I just hope that the Lord sees the good in him and has mercy on him. I hope that the Lord sees the good in him. And this little kid was devastated. But as time went on, you know, after he would have these breakdowns, you would see him and he would look at his mom and say, it's okay, I'm okay. I know I'll be okay. God is with me. And he had this faith, this beautiful, pure faith that was unbelievable to me. I was like, all of the staff that was working with this kid, we were like shocked. We were like, that is such a special kid. And in that moment, I felt such a relief because it's like I knew that he was going to be all right. In the long haul, obviously it's going to be a process. Obviously this is, you know, oh my goodness. But the faith that I saw in him, and it's very weird to even say this, but I did feel a sense of peace in him and his mother. And it brought such a relief to my soul because I knew this guy's going to be okay. And then he went around and started hugging all the staff and said, thank you. And he gave us all hugs. 13-year-old kid. And I went up to the mom and I said, this kid is incredible. This is amazing. And she says, he's just like his father. Just like his father. So anyways, I bring all that up because we get put into circumstances where, of course, the first question that comes to our mind is why? 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 Do you think that kid is ever going to get a satisfying answer to that question? No. Right? And his healing journey is going to involve somehow, some way, with a lot of help, with a lot of support, with a lot of faith, with a lot of community, with a lot of love, coming to terms with not understanding why. And that's how it is for each and every one of us. I wish it could be different. I wish I could say, yeah, God will explain it all to you. Maybe one day at the end of your life, when you're with God and you look back at life, you'll be able to see and have all those answers. But I can't even promise you that. I don't know. So it's important for us to learn how to be okay with not knowing or understanding, because life will bring you into situations where this mind is not going to be able to fully capture or understand what in the heck is going on. Along with this, growing up means, hey, being comfortable with things not going your way, being okay with paradox, learning how to be at peace with all of your emotions. See, being a spiritual person doesn't mean you're not emotional anymore. It doesn't mean you don't have emotions, but it means you're at peace with every emotion that you experience. This is why I don't promote like positivity, be positive all the time. No, I promote peace. And there's a big difference, because positivity means no negativity. Peace means whether it's positive or it's negative, I'm at home with God. I'm at rest in God. I'm okay with the way things are. And so you can be angry, you can be sad, you can be stressed, and still experience this undertone of peace because you're not fighting against those emotions. And that's really the only way that you can heal yourself from your emotional suffering. It's by experiencing it in full. So you learn how to be okay with a complexity of emotion. And that's what growing up looks like. And once you start growing up, then the cleaning up starts to happen. And cleaning up is important. Now, religion placed a hyper focus on cleaning up. Like, hey, don't do this, don't do that. That's bad behavior, that's good behavior. Don't do this, you know. But we completely neglect the waking up and the growing up. Right? We just jump to the cleaning up. And then there's people who think that they're grown up and woke just because they're morally clean. You know, I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't cuss, I don't do whatever. I don't go to the club. I don't dance with those people. All right, whatever the heck you think makes you moral and good or whatever, right? Blah, blah, whatever. Okay? Just because you clean up the outside of the cup doesn't mean the inside ain't dirty. And that's not Danny Prada. That was Jesus. That's why that landed so hard. Some of y'all were like, man, that was good. Yeah, it was Jesus. I know. It was Jesus, bro. It's not me. All right, so that's the cleaning up. And so cleaning up isn't about like just being this perfectly moral person, okay? Cleaning up is about changing your habits. And if we're all being honest with each other, aren't there some habits we develop that we want to change? Okay, the problem is we shame ourselves into trying to change and be different people, and that doesn't work. You can't guilt yourself into change. So first things first, we have to come to some sort of understanding that as human beings, we are habit-forming creatures. Like we are addictive by nature. And you may not use that term to describe yourself and your behavior. But what we can say is that we are habit-forming creatures. And so it is to our benefit to be discerning about the kind of habits that we are beginning to create in our lives, because it's a lot easier to develop a habit than it is to unlearn it. Right? Once you develop the habit, you can get stuck in that thing for a very long time. Developing it, super easy. All you got to do is just the same thing every day for a couple of days. You develop a new habit. Great. All right. Trying to unlearn that, it can be a difficult process. But you know what's so funny? I've noticed this. It's not as easy as it sounds by far. But I'm bringing this up because there's something to it. When you talk to people who have changed their patterns, who have changed their habits, oftentimes in their story, you'll hear something along the lines of, one day I just woke up and decided. Isn't it? Really? It's not that easy. I know it's not that easy, but also it is. You have to want it. So you have to be honest about what you really want, because if you're teeter-tottering between two things, oh, I want to do this, but I'm still going back to this. It's because you actually want this, and you want this more than you want that. So it's not until you get to the point that you want something else more that you actually begin to change. And some of us have, the problem is you have to suffer enough to get to that point. You have to go through enough consequences, because if we can get away with the things that we can get away with and still be functional, then we'll be functional and get away with the things that we can get away with. If we can get away with things and nobody catches us, then we're going to continue to do the things that nobody catches us. But then when the stuff hits the fan, and life starts crumbling down on you, you're like, whoa, oh my gosh, something has to change. Now, it doesn't need to be that way, everybody. For most of us, it has to be that way, unfortunately. And we have such a high tolerance for suffering that we're going to have to screw up our lives a whole lot to get to a point where we have to change. Okay. That's a part of it. You don't got to shame yourself for that. There's no shame, everybody. There's no shame. This is just what it means to be. We're just talking about being human. We've developed these habits. Some of them are really toxic and unhealthy. And we got to figure out how to change them if we don't want to suffer the same way that we've been suffering. Now, even though most of us will need to suffer before we change, technically you don't have to. Okay? Just read the book of Proverbs. Get some wisdom in you. And start learning from the experiences of other people. There are other people who have chosen similar trajectories as you, who have driven themselves straight into a wall. And their lives have crashed and fallen apart. And that can also happen to you. So sometimes you got to scare yourself straight. When I was like 21 and I first became a pastor and I did not have control over my hormones, and, you know, I mean, listen, it's hard as a man and as a woman, just in general, just to not be taken captive by your lust and your attraction to, it's just what it is. And some of y'all feel so uncomfortable right now, but this is humanity. This is human being, and I'm a human being. I'm not here to put on a show. I'm just being myself. Okay, and it's like I've told people before, I'm like, well, I thank God that I have tamed my natural inclinations, but I am still a human being who is liable at any moment to make a mistake. But at that time, I definitely was not tamed at all. And when I was 21 and I became a pastor, there's all this pressure of being a pastor, and I was in a religious setting and in a church setting that wasn't as free and accepting as Heartway. So I had to really be by the book. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to be able to do this long term. Like, there's no way that I'm going to be able to stay pure or whatever, or do this thing like how they're telling me I'm going to do it. And so I started to scare myself straight. I started to, copy these articles that I would find online of pastors who like fell, they committed adultery, or they did this, or they did all like the worst thing ever. And I have a file in my computer to this day. A lot of people are people from around here, people that are local. The guy from down the street over here, the other guy from down the street over there, the other dude that I know from over here. And I'm telling you, at that time, I would just read those articles. And I said, buddy, you going to go down that same path or what? And, God protect me, please. Be with me. I'll become Catholic just for this. But hey, I did that for a reason, though. My point is, I don't have to suffer those consequences myself if I learn from the consequences of other people. I have one buddy of mine who was a pastor of a big church in Fort Lauderdale who had a huge scandal and stuff and cheated on his wife and all these things. And he got to the point where he wanted to kill himself. He wanted to kill himself. And he actually shared one day on Facebook the letter that he wrote prior to, offing himself. So you read these things and you see these things, and it's like, man, do I really want? I don't want that. I don't want that. I want something else more. So you don't have to just learn through your suffering. You can learn from the experiences of others. But the whole point is, you have to be comfortable with your imperfections. So the change and transformation comes, the habits begin to change when you learn how to love yourself through your imperfections instead of trying to shame yourself for being the way that you are. As paradoxical as that sounds, if you can just live your life totally accepting of who you are, going through those mess ups and screw ups, going back to the old patterns and habits and not guilt tripping yourself, but learning about yourself, understanding yourself more, and loving yourself through it, that's actually how you begin to heal. So one of our leaders put in the men's chat this week this wonderful little quote that I wanted to share with you guys. And it said, when milk spoils, it turns into yogurt, which is more valuable than milk. If it spoils further, it becomes cheese, which is even more valuable than the yogurt and the milk. In the same way, grape juice sours, and then it becomes wine, which is more expensive than the grape juice. What's the point? Your mistakes don't make you a bad person. Your mistakes are just experiences that enhance your value as an individual. You see that? So this is why, that's it. That's all we're talking about. You know what? You're going to have to mess up as many times as you mess up. You're going to have to screw up as many times as you screw up. But instead of keeping yourself stuck in this idea that you're a horrible person, you're a bad person, can you extract from these experiences the lessons that they're there to teach you and allow your value to be enhanced as a result? This is why a lot of the medieval theologians would talk about something called felix culpa. That means happy faults. I think it was St. Augustine who created the term. Felix culpa, happy faults. What does that mean, happy faults? Well, if you fall, if you sin, if you make a mistake, if you go off track, that is an opportunity for you to grow. It's an opportunity for you to learn. you can experience God's grace, God's love, God's mercy, God's forgiveness in such a powerful way in those moments than in the moments when you have it all right. So if me messing up brings me closer to God, teaches me more about myself, and is enhancing my value as a human being, then this is a happy fault. It's a happy fault. So be happy that you're as screwed up as you are. It's what makes you human. This isn't about being perfect. It's about being real. And then last but not least is showing up. All that means is you wake up, you grow up, you clean up. Now what? You show up in the world as the most loving version of you. Your life has nothing to do with you. When you go through this process of spiritual growth and development, you come to realize you are here to be a vessel through which God's love can impact the people around you. And so now it's about using your knowledge, your skills, your resources, and all of your experiences to touch another human life with love. And guess what? The best material that you have to impact other people is all of the stuff that you've been through, all of the screw-ups you've made, all of the faults, all of the hidden things in your closet. When you bring that out vulnerably to other people, that makes the greatest impact. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day who was like, I don't want to bother you with this stuff. I said, bother me? Hearing you work through your things helps me. Hearing you be so raw and vulnerable, that's helping me. It's teaching me. So that's the greatest impact that you can make. So being a spiritual person doesn't mean you're secluded. You go off on some mountain and you don't ever, talk to anybody again, even though that's enticing sometimes to just be anti-social. It's certainly a temptation. I know for some of y'all, COVID was the best time of your life because you didn't have to talk to nobody. Okay, but no, we're meant to be in the world, but not of the world. Right? So be in the world, show up, shine God's light, heal people, make a contribution to this world, be of service to this world, and that's how you're going to find fulfillment and satisfaction in your life. All right, let's pray. God, we thank you so much that we're a work in progress and that we are under construction. Help us to take responsibility for this role that you have given us to be the architect of our lives. May we have many more wake-up moments, and may we have many moments of growth and maturity. May you help us clean up our lives in the way that they need to be clean without shaming and guilting ourselves in the process. And may you help us to show up in this world as the best versions of ourselves so that we can make a difference for your kingdom. We thank you, God, that you're with us every step of this journey and that we can rely on you even in those moments when we're feeling weak and tired. You're there for us. You're carrying us. And we praise you for that. In your name we pray. Amen. Amen. All right, everybody. Thank you guys for being here, and we'll catch you next weekend. Take it easy.